On May 31st, 1995, a woman named Jennifer Fairgate checks into the 5-star Oslo Plaza hotel. A few days later, she's found to death in a hotel room, which is double locked from the inside. There's no evidence of a struggle, but police do take note of several really bizarre details. However, due to the fact the door was double locked from the inside, the only conclusion that made sense is that Jennifer herself. So they tried to contact her family to let them know what happened to Jennifer. But what happened next would transform this basic case into one of the most baffling mysteries that Norway has ever seen. Actually, the best way to describe the story is it's like a script for an M. Night Shyamalan movie. Nothing makes sense, and there's just one weird plot twist after the other. Right, so on May 22nd, 1995, Jennifer Fairgate called the top luxury hotel in the city at the time, the Oslo Plaza Hotel, and booked a business class room for 2 nights. She got booked into room 2805 on the 28th floor. Now in this particular hotel, floors 27 to 37 were for premium guests only, and they were also quite expensive. And above these business class rooms are hotel facilities. But something to note about this hotel is that the conference rooms were on the 33rd floor, which were often used by country leaders and people of influence who stayed at the Oslo Plaza for secret meetings. These included meetings like the Israeli-Palestinian peace talks which took place in the 90s, among many other peacekeeping negotiations and political affairs. However, it is important to point out as well that at the time of Jennifer's death, there were no political meetings being held. That said though, that will be important in a minute. Now when Jennifer called and booked a room on May 22nd, the front desk operator recalled that Jennifer spoke clear and fluent English, and she didn't seem concerned about the price of the room. Then on the afternoon of May 31st, she called the hotel again to change her arrival time to later that evening, and to tell them that she was coming with a Lois Fairgate. During this phone call, she was speaking clear and fluent German. The front desk operator actually identified her accent as East German. Then sometime around 10:30 p.m. on the evening of May 31st, a young woman, stylishly dressed in black with short black hair, checked in at the Oslo Plaza. Now the reason I brought up the fact that country leaders and people of influence stayed at this hotel frequently is because that led to the Oslo Plaza having strict rules about security, so identifying all of their guests was essential. But somehow, Jennifer was able to book a business class room without giving any identification. She didn't have to show her passport, she didn't have to pay a deposit or a fee in advance, she didn't even have to show a credit card. In fact, the hotel didn't even have a way to charge her, so they broke all of their rules by doing this, and to this day, no one knows how or why this happened. But there may be an explanation that comes from a witness who stayed at the hotel at the same time, but I will get to that soon. So while she was checking in at the front desk, the names Jennifer Fairgate and Lois Fairgate were written on the registration card. One of the front desk operators remembered seeing a dark-haired man standing beside Jennifer, either when she checked in or when she went back to the front desk to exchange currency later that evening. Now, other than these 2 reports, there is no more information regarding the currency exchange, which means we don't know what kind of currency she came into Norway with, which would help us find out where she came from, and there were no more sightings of the dark-haired man assumed to be Lois Fairgate. Now, to better understand the timeline of her stay at the Oslo, we can track the 5 times she entered the room with her keycard data and witness accounts, but we cannot keep track of when she opened the door without the keycard, like if she opened the door from the inside and left the room. So after Jennifer finishes up at reception, she heads up to room 2805 and opens the door for the first time at 10:44 p.m. on Wednesday, May 31st. She seems to have slipped out quickly and re-enters the room a second time almost 2 hours later, 21 minutes after midnight on Thursday, June 1st. She then enters the room a third time 8 hours later at 8:34 a.m. on the same Thursday morning. Then shortly before 1 p.m. the same day, 2 hotel maids visit the room to service it. But Jennifer was not there, and they were surprised at how clean the room was. It was almost as if no one was even staying in there. One of the maids also noticed a vivid pair of pink shoes in the room that she remembers clearly because she thought to herself, "Ooh, das gut, ja, will get me a pair of those." Oh, I'm sorry, I'm such an asshole. Now, why this is important is because those shoes would completely disappear later and were not the shoes Jennifer was wearing when she was found dead. The maids also noticed that one of the sets of sheets for the beds was completely unused, so she placed it in the closet. This is also important because that sheet would be back on the other bed when she was found dead. Then later the same day, several messages asking Jennifer for payment are sent to her room's TV. These messages are not responded to until she re-enters the room a fourth time at 8:50 a.m. on Friday morning, June 2nd. She then responds okay to each message, and then she goes to the front desk and extends her stay until Sunday, June 4th. She is then seen by a hotel employee entering the room for a fifth and final time at 11:03 a.m. and she puts a do not disturb sign on the door. She would never use her key card again after that, and apparently never left the room again after this. Then at 8:06 p.m. on Friday, June 2nd, Jennifer ordered room service. She ordered a hot bite, which is bratwurst and potato salad. Or bratwurst and potato salad, the pronunciation of that doesn't really matter. What does matter is that our final witness, Kristen Anderson, who is believed to be the last person to see Jennifer alive, delivered the food at 8:23 p.m. and she noticed that the room was so clean, she used the term sterile to describe it. According to her, the room looked untouched, and so did the bed. She also noticed that Jennifer was wearing a long skirt and had a suitcase that looked like the ones that flight attendants use. This is also important because both the skirt and the suitcase would also disappear later. According to Kristen, Jennifer was not interested in small talk. However, Jennifer did give her a 50 krona tip, which was considered to be extremely generous. It was also the only piece of cash that the police would ever have tied to Jennifer, but it didn't help at all. Then on Saturday, June 3rd, now 3 days into her stay, one of the hotel's receptionists named Evie Jurtson realized that Jennifer had exceeded her credit limit. She had run up a tab and she had still not given them a credit card. So at 7:36 p.m, Evie sent a message to the room's TV saying please contact the cashier. Jennifer immediately responded to this message with okay. Evie then learnt of the previous messages sent to the room, so she then contacted housekeeping and learned that no one had been in there since it was cleaned on Thursday. So feeling now that something must be wrong, Evie contacted hotel security. Then about 15 minutes later at 7:50 p.m, a part-time security guard named Espinace was sent up to check and see if everything was okay in room 2805. He takes the elevator up to the 28th floor, walks down the hallway to Jennifer's room, and he knocks on the door. Just seconds later, he hears a gunshot ring out from the room. Now unsure of what to do, he quickly runs and takes cover behind a small protrusion in the corridor. After waiting there for a few seconds, Espen then decides to head back down to security headquarters on the ground floor. He did have a two-way radio with him, but he didn't want to announce the shooting to the whole staff. Once there, he heads directly to the security chief and tells him about the incident. For the next 15 minutes, no one had eyes on room 2805. At 8:04 p.m, the security chief heads up to the room and knocks on the door 3 times. No one answers, and it was noticed that the door was double locked from the inside. In this position, only security can enter it when the door is locked this way. The chief then used the security key to unlock the door, and he enters room 2805. The first thing security noticed was a quote, acrid or bitter smell in the air. The window was open, the curtain was fluttering, and the TV was still on. He noticed her legs hanging off the edge of the bed, and he called out to Jennifer. After a few seconds of not seeing her move or getting a response from her, he backed out of the room, closed and locked the door, and went back down to security headquarters and told his colleagues to call the police. At about 8:50 p.m, police arrived at the Oslo Plaza. According to Audun Christensen, the prosecuting authority for the Oslo Police Department, they approached the woman's room very carefully. They discovered her lying face up on the bed with a bullet in her forehead. Jennifer Fairgate was deceased. The almost fully loaded gun was still in her right hand, which was resting on her chest, and if you check this photo, she had a quote, very special hand grip on the gun. If you're only listening, she was basically holding the gun backwards with her thumb on the trigger and her fingers around the handle. Police also noted that the trigger was still being held in the fired position. When the gun was removed from her hand, a click could be heard as the trigger reset and moved towards the forward position. There is a photo of her face out there on the internet, but I can't really show that because of the bullet hole and, she's not alive. So I'll just say she was wearing makeup and she was dressed entirely in black, wearing a long blouse, bra, silk tap pants, stockings, and Italian-made heeled shoes. She really does kinda look like she was about to go out for the night, but in stark contrast to her stylish outfit, she was wearing a Citizen Aqualand. An Aqualand is a clunky and robust tool watch and not the expected watch of a young fashionable Belgian woman, so it was seemingly out of place. Alright, now just to make it clear, that was not my opinion, that was what the police and investigators said about it. I don't know anything about fashion, and I couldn't care less about what watches people are wearing. But it does seem to be a big clue, but we will come back to the watch soon. Police then inspected the ballistics. The bullet's path lined up and indicated that she was lying on her back on the bed when the gun had fired, so she had not been moved. However, they also discovered that 2 bullets had been fired from the woman's gun. The first shot went through a pillow, the mattress, and the bed, and apparently was done as a test firing. It was found embedded in the floor, only a few centimeters away from the one that killed her. Police theorized that she used the pillow as a silencer for the first shot because a burn mark on it showed that she had flipped it over after she fired the first bullet. The next thing they inspected was the blood patterns. Jennifer's blood was everywhere. It had soaked the mattress and bed linen. There were blood spots in other parts of the rooms. It was all over the pillow, the phone, the bedside table, the wall behind her, and her blood even spattered the ceiling. However, there was nothing found on her chest, face, and hands. Nothing at all. There was no blood, no soot, and not even gunshot residue. Now fair enough, gunshot residue is not a guarantee, and it's not always found in the hands of victims. And in this case, the way she was holding the gun may have prevented any residue from coming onto her hands. But future investigations done into this case have also noted that it is very unusual that even though her blood splattered across the entire room, there was nothing found on her face, her chest, her hands, or even the gun. So the Oslo Police Department started looking around the room for answers. They checked the room from top to bottom, and the first thing they noticed was that there was no evidence at all that anyone else had been in the room, and what they did find suggested that she had been there alone. The head of security also confirmed that the door had been double locked from the inside, which should mean that if somebody her, there would be no way for them to lock the door like that on their way out. They also found the final meal that she ordered still inside the room, half eaten, and 3 empty soda bottles and an open bag of chips on the counter. It also appeared as if someone had a shower just prior to her death. The hotel's bathrobe was laying on one of the beds, and a used towel was laying on the bathroom floor. Next to the sink was a bar of soap and an open bottle of shampoo. They also found a turquoise and green travel-like cloth travel bag and a black Braun Buffel attaché case. Both bags were found to be made in Germany. Now, interestingly, the black Buffel Braun attaché case held 25 more rounds of ammunition for the pistol she was holding. What she needed so much ammo for is a complete mystery. There was also a bottle of cologne for men that had Jennifer's fingerprints all over them. In fact, everything in the room only had Jennifer's prints on them, except for one item, a bag with a USA Today newspaper inside it. The numbers 2816 were written on the newspaper bag. However, no one bothered to check who was staying in that room at the time. Police then only interviewed a handful of people, and no one really seemed to hear anything. There was only one report from Saturday, June 3rd of loud banging coming from somewhere close to Jennifer's room. Alright, now let's change our focus to what the police didn't find in the room. There were no signs of a struggle or forced entry, and there was nothing in the room that could lead the police to figuring out who the woman was. There were no credit cards, no driver's license, no plane tickets, no handbag, no wallet, money, pictures, car keys, house keys. There were also no cosmetics, no toiletries, no hairbrush, not even a fucking toothbrush. So the police were pretty puzzled at this point. And it was even weirder because people usually need a passport to get to Norway. Police then looked at the woman's clothing and found something that wasn't exactly weird, but it was noteworthy. All of the labels of Jennifer's clothing had been removed. Only one item of clothing, a grey woman's blazer hanging in the closet, still had the label in it. This blazer was also later traced to a German fashion house called René Lazard. It appeared that the label was impossible to remove without destroying the blazer's lining. Even though they found sweaters, trench coats, jackets, and many other items of clothing for her upper body, bizarrely, there was nothing for the waist down. No pants, no skirts, no dresses, no underwear, not even other shoes. Now that's significant because the hotel maid vividly remembered the pink pair of bright heels, and Kristen remembered there being a suitcase in the room, similar to the type that flight attendants use, but now both of these items were missing. So what happened to them? Well, the police theorized that she may have gotten rid of some of her belongings before she herself. The obvious question then is why? And where? Because these items were never found. Now, according to Officer Christensen, when the police learned that Jennifer barely left the room during her stay at the Oslo, and there was no evidence that anyone else entered the room around the time of her death, and that the door was double locked from the inside, the police just believed that Jennifer had stuck to herself and spent almost her entire time in Oslo in her hotel room, preparing to herself. During her autopsy, they noted her last meal, the hot bite that was found in her room half eaten, was still undigested in her stomach, which means she either on Friday night or ate her meal almost 24 hours after it was delivered. They also checked her for alcohol, but nothing was found in her blood, and since it was assumed that nothing out of the ordinary happened to her, no further tests were done. So no toxicology test, no checking for signs of sexual assault, nothing. And so the police set out to notify Jennifer's family that she had died. The only thing that was known about her was the information she gave on the hotel registration card. Her name was listed as Jennifer Fairgate. However, she also spelt it twice as Fairgate. Her date of birth was listed as August 23rd, 1973, making her 21 years old, and her telephone number was listed as being from Belgium. Her home address was listed as 148 Rue de la Station in Villaine, which is a tiny village found in Belgium, and her place of employment was listed as service. So the Oslo police called the Belgian police, hoping that they could go ahead and notify the family. And this is where we get to our first minor M. Night Shyamalan plot twist that you probably all saw coming from a mile away. Jennifer Fairgate did not exist. She somehow checked in under a false name. All of the information she provided did not exist either. The postal code was wrong, the phone number was fake, the company service, they had no record of her working for them. Police learned that she called 2 numbers in Belgium from her hotel room. The numbers were identical, except for one single digit, and it was also determined that neither of them existed. So the police then asked the Belgian Interpol to look into Lois Fairgate, who it turned out also did not exist. Even though all of this was incredibly suspicious, they never bothered to check the security cameras because they were still convinced that she just came to the hotel under a false name, got a few free nights and some food, and then off. And despite quote-unquote police's best efforts to find her friends and family, nobody ever came forward to identify Jennifer. So the police then just said fuck it and buried her in an unmarked grave. Now unsurprisingly, loads of people have accused the Oslo police of just rushing to close this case for some reason, which does kinda seem to be the case. Then on Friday, June 9th, 6 days after Jennifer's death, a woman named, and please forgive me if I butcher this, Borghild Strandenes, called the Oslo police station. She worked in a travel agency and had many years of experience in the hotel industry. She was staying in room 2818 at the same time Jennifer was at the Oslo, and she was on the same floor. And she wanted to tell the police how surprised she had been at the Oslo Plaza staff's inattentiveness. She wasn't even asked to fill out a registration card when she checked in. Now that's interesting, and explains how Jennifer was able to get into the hotel under a false name. Borghild also told the police about a suspicious foreign couple she had seen at the hotel, but the police just pretty much dismissed that and never called her back asking for more information about them. Now, according to the hotel records, there was a French-speaking Belgian man staying in room 2804, which was directly opposite Jennifer's, who it turned out was also using a fake Belgian identity. And according to police documents that I cannot personally find, but other journalists have, the man was in Oslo for business and stayed at the plaza from Friday, June 2nd to Saturday, June 3rd. This man is only known as Mr. F, and this probably won't surprise you at this point, but he was never questioned by the police about what he saw. Then nothing happened with the investigation or the case for about 20 years until investigators started looking into the case again to try to solve the mystery of who the woman really was, since still no one had come forward to identify her yet. And here comes the major M. Night Shyamalan plot twist in the story. The connections to Belgium reminded a lot of people about 2 very similar cases. If you look into a lot of cold cases, or if you like unsolved mysteries, you're probably going to be familiar with these 2. About 2 decades before the incident in the Oslo Plaza, a woman, now famously referred to as the Isdal Woman, was found partially burned alive with poison in her stomach in a remote part of Norway called Ice Valley. She also came from or around Belgium. Disguises and encrypted messages were found amongst her belongings. The tags in her clothing were also cut out, and one of the big brain theories about her is that she was a spy. The other very similar case is the Kambo Man, who was found dead on a railway track in Kambo, Norway. He was fully dressed, with just the exception of his underwear being missing, and all of the labels of his clothing were also removed, but investigators were later able to determine that his clothing had been made in Germany. He had no money or identification cards or documents with him, but inside his left shoe was a piece of tape with the number 15250 written on it. DNA testing on him also revealed a connection to Belgium. So when investigators started looking closer at the strange details of Jennifer Fairgate's case, one interesting note from her autopsy is that a few people involved with it believed that she could be German, based on a few factors, like on the account that she spoke fluent German with an East German accent, and the handful of items that were able to be traced back to Germany. So in November 2016, a new investigation was launched, and Jennifer's body was exhumed. They compared the carbon-14 levels in the atmosphere to certain structures like the enamel in her teeth, and they determined that Jennifer was most likely born in 1971, which would make her 24 years old at the time of her death. And after doing DNA tests, it was determined that she most likely lived in East Germany, or at least while she was still young. But aside from her DNA, there was a large amount of evidence that seems to indicate that Jennifer did indeed live in Germany at some point in her life. The numbers on her ring indicated that it was from Germany. The type of dental work done on her was popular in Germany. The handful of belongings that I already mentioned were German, and of course, she spoke German. However, there were no missing persons reports that matched Jennifer Fairgate from either Belgium or from Germany. So what does this all mean? Well, basically, not even the police were sure what really happened anymore. So they started reinvestigating the other odd details, like the blood spatter. Her blood covered quite a lot of spots in the room. However, nothing seemed to land on her. Based on the way that she was lying down, blood should have also been found on her chest and on her clothes, if nothing was blocking it. So one experienced investigator named Per Iverson believes that this suggests that somebody held Jennifer's arms down with their knees, put their hand over her face, and angled it back so that her head was in the right position, and then fired and then placed the gun in her hand. Now, if that is true, then why didn't Jennifer fight back? Well, the theory is that maybe she was drugged. However, because the police initially believed that this was a suicide, no toxicology test was done for drugs, they only tested for alcohol. Iverson believes that based on the evidence, Jennifer Fairgate was murdered. So this brings us straight back to the elephant in the room, or more specifically, the double-locked door. Jennifer was on the 28th floor, so if the killer could not have come out through the door, then where the hell did they go? Did they go through the window like James Bond? No, they could have actually, very easily, double-locked the door from the outside. Check this video out. Now again, if you're just listening to this video is of a guy showing how to double-lock the exact same type of door with just a string from the outside. Basically, the handle just needs to be pulled up into the upright position, so the string just goes through the gap at the top of the door, pull it up, pull the string off, and then you leave. I should probably also mention right now that my voice is currently dying, so if I sound raspy, I'm sorry. Now, something else the police noticed about the gun, other than they were not able to find any fingerprints on it, they were also not able to trace it because its serial number, quote, had been professionally removed with acid. This gun was a 9mm semi-automatic Browning pistol. Now, I am not a gun guy, I don't know what that means, but according to the experts, this type of weapon is a heavy assault weapon and not typically the kind of gun you would defend yourself with. The weapon experts also determined that the gun wasn't an original Browning, but instead was a Hungarian copy from the 60s or 70s and was made of parts from several other weapons. It also appeared to be poorly maintained, suggesting that it may have been used by criminals. A retired crime scene investigator named Gears Couch says the gun is a strong one with really strong recoil, and normally a gun like that would be thrown away from the body after it's discharged. Therefore, it is very, very unusual that the gun didn't fall out of Jennifer's hand, considering her very unusual grip on the gun. The next question is, what was Jennifer doing that she needed so much ammo for? 2 bullets had been fired, 7 remained in the clip, and 25 more rounds were found in her attaché case. Another good question is, Where she got them from, now please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that in Norway, it is not very easy to come across a gun. Either way though, people kept pointing out the similarities between the Isdal Woman, the Kambo Man, and Jennifer Fairgate, and therefore speculated that Jennifer Fairgate was also a spy. Now, I've already mentioned several times about the clothing tags being removed. Now, some people don't like tags because they're annoying. Fair enough. But some people don't like clothing tags because they help trace you back to places, which is exactly what her grey blazer did, as well as her 2 travel bags, which were all made in Germany. Now, speaking of that, the one clue about this woman is the only item that was seemingly not modified to remove identifiers, her Citizen Aqualand dive watch. The Aqualand worn on her left wrist, by any definition, is a robust tool watch and specifically a dive watch with a strong military provenance. The same type of watch version has been issued to many units including the British Special Boat Service and the Danish Frogman Corps. Again, this clunky Aqualand was not the expected watch of a young fashionable Belgian woman. So this has led a lot of people to look at this case from a tradecraft perspective. Fairgate's profile is potentially consistent with that of an intelligence officer. The use of hotels for operational purposes is as old as espionage itself and is still a common practice today, though it's much more difficult with the rise of technical surveillance. Now, something to note is that many intelligence services have carried out targeted killings and assassinations with the goal of making it look like a suicide. The Russian KGB and Israeli Mossad are 2 services with a history of operational activity in Norway and often do their hits in hotels. Actually, just as recently as January 2010, a team of Mossad operatives, many using European aliases, assassinated Hamas official Mahmoud Al-Mabhouh in his hotel room in Dubai using an injection to make it appear to be of natural causes. They then did this double lock trick from the outside, and the body was not discovered until the following day. Mossad is also known to have carried out at least 1 botched assassination in Norway. In 1973, a hit team mistook a Moroccan waiter for that of a Black September member named Hassan Salameh. They shot him 13 times with a .22 caliber pistol. This incident has since become known as the Lillehammer Affair. Alright, I took a break and it seems like my voice is back now. So now, while there is nothing directly connecting Fairgate to Israel, Mossad is widely known to use dual citizens for covert and clandestine operations. The Oslo Plaza Hotel was also reportedly one of the locations for secret negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian authorities for the Oslo II Accords, signed just a few months after Jennifer Fairgate's death. Now, of course, they may have absolutely nothing to do with each other, but some people speculate that Jennifer Fairgate may have been the target of a Mossad assassination. A guy named Ola Kaldager, and again, I'm butchering all these names and I'm sorry about that. I can't even find a website to say how to pronounce his name properly, so I'm pretty much just guessing. But Ola Kaldager was a group leader for Norway's intelligence service E14, and he pointed out various features of the crime scene that do suggest that Jennifer Fairgate was the target of an intelligence assassination. Based on the logs from the keycard reader, she was absent from the room for extended periods of time, and at one point for approximately 20 hours, which could indicate operational activity. The use of throwaway aliases is also common, and Russian illegals even go as far to assume the identity of a deceased child. Another element that could point to Jennifer possibly being a spy has to do with her selection of clothing. A search of the room revealed very few personal items, except several changes of clothes for her upper body, which could be used for quick profile changes while in operation. While removing tags from the clothing is not necessarily common for spies to do, intel collectors are trained to remove all pocket litter or anything identifiable when in alias. And of course, the big thing that a lot of people have pointed out is the awkward grip on the gun and the fact there was no blood on Jennifer. This is possibly an indication that there was another shooter. Since there was a second bullet hole through the pillow and the mattress, in theory, that could have been a test shot from Jennifer, or a warning shot to scare off the hotel security guard at the door. This could be the reason that Espinace, the first security guard to head up to room 2805, heard the gunshot almost immediately after knocking on the door. And then of course, there is the 15-minute time gap between the gunshot and the arrival of the head of security. So in that time, no one has any idea what happened in or around that room. Now, for the sake of conversation, if there was a person in that room that shot her, as soon as Espinace went back down to the ground floor, The assassin could have left the room and locked it from the hallway with the piece of string. And now when we take a second look at the Aqualand dive watch, it does seem to be a massive clue in this case. That Aqualand that she was wearing was authentic, and it did show evidence of it being either purchased or serviced in Germany. Right, so I've been bringing up Germany a lot in the story. So what is the significance of Germany? Well, according to John Cipher, who ran the CIA's Russian operations, so basically, this guy knows his shit. He explained that Norway and Scandinavian countries have long been of interest to Russia due to its proximity and strategic issues including the Baltic Sea and oil, as well as an opening to Western Europe. After the fall of the East German Stasi officers were often recruited by Russian services to carry out operations in Europe because German nationals could easily move around Europe without raising suspicions. Now also, the fact that literally no one has ever come forward to identify her points to this possibility as well. Ola Kaldager states that if she was an intelligence officer and was killed on duty, both sides would be very quiet about it. The government would go to the family, give them money, and tell them to quote, "Keep quiet, your daughter is a hero." They would then take care of the family for the rest of their lives, and that is apparently common practice for professional intelligence organizations. Now I say apparently because I personally don't actually know, because I am not a spy. And I realize that sounds kind of suspicious, but I'm not a spy, I promise. But what is interesting is we've heard this kind of thing before in the Khamar Daban investigation. I've done a video on that story already. It does kind of suck, so I'm sorry about that. But basically, 6 hikers die in the Khamar Daban mountain range under very, very strange circumstances. And it is theorized that they died because they encountered experimental chemical weapons. There is an actual testimony from one of the hikers' daughters that she was paid to not ask questions. And when I say paid, she was paid enough to buy a nice apartment. She was also not allowed to view the body of her mother, which at the time she thought was because she was only 16 years old. But it turned out that no one in her family was allowed to help identify the body or see it either. Now that said though, the official cause of death released by authorities was said to be from pulmonary edemas and hypothermia. Now my goal is not to spread conspiracy theories and stuff, but if they died of hypothermia, then what harm is there in the family seeing the bodies? And then why the fuck would they give this woman enough money to buy an apartment? So there we go. I think I've given enough possible reasons that Jennifer Fairgate could have potentially, maybe, been the target of an intelligence assassination. Alright, now let's get to the real M. Night Shyamalan plot twist in the story. A journalist named Lars Wegner started looking into this case and started looking for the French-speaking Belgian man known only as Mr. F, who stayed in room 2804 right across the hallway from Jennifer's on the night of Friday, June 2nd, and checked out early on Saturday morning, June 3rd. Since his room faced Jennifer's, they were hoping that maybe he would have some additional information that could solve the mystery, but at the same time, they were kind of expecting him to not know anything since he checked out a half a day before she shot herself. But they tried to track him down anyway. It seemed that Mr. F quit his job he held in 1995 soon after this incident, so his listed email address and phone numbers were no longer active. But they eventually found an email linked to him and started chatting with him. But as soon as they brought up the Oslo incident, he stopped replying. Lars Wegner and his team then somehow managed to find out his home address in Belgium, which tells me it's probably time to start using a VPN more often. They then went over to his home and knocked on the door. Mr. F then answers through a closed door, and as soon as Lars and his team tell them who they are and what they want to talk about, he says, quote, "I am not available, thanks." They then try to talk to him through the closed door again, but he doesn't answer back. For 2 days, they try to establish contact with him by leaving messages and business cards and letters, and finally in the afternoon of day 2, Mr. F calls Lars' cell phone while they're outside his house. Now that's kinda creepy, so maybe he just wanted to get rid of them, I'm not sure, but he phoned them, and I'm gonna read the actual conversation as laid out by Lars Wegner on his website VG. "This is Mr. F. What is this about? I explained that it concerns something that happened in Oslo in early June 1995. Mr. F confirms that he was in Oslo at the time for work and stayed at the hotel. There was a woman who died, wasn't there? A suicide? Asks Mr. F with no prompting. It was an answer I was not expecting. I remember it well because they asked me about it at the front desk when I checked out. Someone asked if I had heard or seen anything since it was in the same corridor, but I slept well that night and knew nothing about it. I have his checkout form from the hotel, but to be on the safe side, I asked Mr. F whether he is absolutely sure of the day and he confirms the details. I stayed there from Friday to Saturday. When I checked out, they told me about the lady who died. I've stayed at thousands of hotels, so for me, this was no big thing. Mr. F doesn't want us to come in to show him photos and drawings of the Plaza woman. Were you ever contacted by the police? No, I've never talked to anyone. But Mr. F, this is very strange. You checked out of the hotel on Saturday morning, but the young woman didn't die until Saturday night, almost 12 hours later. I don't see how they could ask you about the death on Saturday morning when the woman wasn't dead yet. Mr. F is quick to respond. I don't know anything about that. I just remember they asked me. That's all I know. The conversation is over. Later we try several times to contact Mr. F again. That he checked out of the hotel almost 12 hours before the Plaza woman was found dead is indisputable. We would like to ask Mr. F more questions, but have not succeeded in getting in touch with him. Alright, so there's 3 possibilities here. 1. Mr. F fabricated a memory. That's not uncommon, it happens all the time. 2. He knew a bit more than he claimed. Or 3. This guy doesn't exist, and Lars Wegner made it up. All are plausible, and I guess it's up to you to decide to trust Wegner or not. But based on his effort to figure out what happened to Jennifer Fairgate, I don't believe he made it up, and the claim is also not outrageous. Alright, now that's pretty much the gist of the Jennifer Fairgate mystery, so now it's time to get into the theories. Theory number 1. She herself. Definitely possible. Not gonna argue against it. While all the circumstances surrounding the case are admittedly bizarre, she could have just herself. The problem comes in when we start considering the fact that for over 30 years, she has remained unidentified. Also, again, it is not impossible that shit does happen, but surely somewhere, someone would know who she is. Everyone has a someone in their life, and this case has been reported on enough to come to the attention of at least someone who might recognize her. But again, it's not impossible. The other issue is the gun. The serial number being erased with acid and the mixed match parts and poor maintenance indicate that it had been in the possession of criminals. So the question is, how did she end up with it? But then again, it is not impossible that she did. Somehow, somewhere she could have found it, or stole it, or bought it on the black market, although I do understand that in Norway it is a little more difficult to do that. But then again, it's not like she had a high-tech alien weapon or something, it's a gun. It's not impossible that she found it. Theory number 2. She was a high-end escort. This theory is a bit more convoluted, but the idea comes from the fact that while the purchase of sexual services is illegal in Norway, including renting a premises like a hotel room for sexual services, is punishable by fines or imprisonment. However, selling sexual services is not illegal, so something that wasn't uncommon, apparently, was that hotels would do some off-the-book shit to rent out hotel rooms to escorts. Now this was my original thought of how she checked into the hotel with a fake identity, but apparently, this was already common at the Oslo, and some people got to their rooms without even filling in registration cards. But the theory suggests that perhaps Jennifer called the hotel to add the +1, the lowest fare gate, to her room, because then hotel staff wouldn't pay her any mind when she brought a man into the room. She could have also been planning on meeting up with clients at the Oslo. Now some people have pointed out that the clothing the police found in the room could suggest that she was an escort, like the lingerie found in the room for example, and the theory suggests that perhaps a client killed her, or, she could have stolen herself. This could also be a good reason for her to have a gun with her, for her protection. But we are still presented with the same problem. It's been 30 years, and she's still unidentified. So even if she was an escort, who are just regular people at the end of the day, she probably had friends and family. So why has no one reported her missing, or come forward to identify her yet? Alright, I'm not going to waste much time on theory 3, because it seems the internet is in agreement about the fact that this one is wrong. But if you Google Jennifer Fairgate, this is often a picture that you will see pop up. This is a photo of a Danish woman named Camilla Steinaa. She was born in Denmark and she was 25 years old when she disappeared from North Zealand. She also apparently had expensive dental work done, but the one major thing that stands out is that Camilla Steinaa had a tattoo of her anchor on her ankle. Now it's not clear if Jennifer Fairgate had any tattoos, but if she did, I'm sure the police would have been able to piece it together very quickly. And our fourth and final theory, Jennifer Fairgate was assassinated. When looking closer at the available details, it is plausible that Jennifer could have been a spy, and that her death, most likely a murder, was covered up. This idea comes directly from intelligence specialists like John Cipher and Ola Kaldager. According to them, the position of the alleged weapon is a major red flag. We have to remember that Jennifer Fairgate fired a very powerful assault weapon with a very unusual hand grip with her thumb on the trigger, but the gun somehow stayed in her hand. Due to this weapon's powerful recoil, it's highly improbable that the gun would have remained in her grip, especially when holding it in such an awkward way. And then there's the lack of blood on her chest, hands and gun. Even though the blood hit the ceiling, it's more likely the gun was hastily placed there. The police then unfortunately destroyed or ignored the surviving evidence upon closing the case, saying that they were 99.9% sure that it was a suicide, basing that conclusion on the door being double locked from within. However, we know how easy it is to do that from the outside at the Oslo. And if we trust Lars Wegner, he also found the actual gun during his investigation, and tests revealed that it had been wiped clean. It's true that in most suicides, gunshot residue is not always found on the victim's hands, or fingerprints are not always found on the gun, but according to Wegner, based on how clean the gun was, it suggests that it was placed in Jennifer's hand. And a lot of her things were missing, like her clothes, her bags, her toiletries, documents and so on. And the autopsy revealed the hot bite she ordered on Friday night was still undigested in her stomach, meaning she either died on Friday night or she ate the meal 24 hours later. Now sure, if Fairgate did indeed intend to kill herself, she may not have been in a state of mind where she necessarily cared about what she ate, but perhaps the available details show us that she didn't really die on Saturday when the gunshot was heard, but on Friday, and the room was staged to protect her assassin. There is also the newspaper that was found with the number 2816 written on it, leaving Wegner to theorize that Fairgate had a second room, or she was actually tracking the person who booked that room. If Mr. F was responsible or involved in her death, checking out Saturday morning would not only give him a great alibi, but also explain how he knew Jennifer was dead before her body had been discovered. The second gunshot could have been an attempt to scare off the security guard knocking on the door, and the assassin made his quick getaway with the fancy string trick. This theory would be rock solid if the acrid smell security noticed when they entered the room was actually coming from Jennifer because she had been dead for 24 hours. Unfortunately, the term acrid is also used to describe the smell of a gunshot, so at the end of the day, it could be either and leads us nowhere. Yeah, this case, oh man, this case is infuriating. This is the same feeling I get at the end of an M. Night Shyamalan movie, Emptiness. So I'm gonna call it here. My conclusion is I have no idea, but what do you think? As always, if you have anything you want to add to the video, please leave your thoughts and theories in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you again soon with another unsolved mystery. Thanks for watching.